Welcome to my first video. Here we have a Stanley 113. I haven't attempted to type it. A circular or compass plane. This video is going to be about dovetails, how I cut dovetails, how I lay them out, and how I make a box to put this 113 on my tool wall as I attempt to organize my workshop. To get started, I thought this is a cool plane for the collection. Use some cool wood. I figure I'll start with pretty much the roughest piece of wood you can get. This came from a slab that I milled, a walnut tree from my friend's house. I'm going to take it from this rough stock and cut it down to make one dovetail box. I am fortunate that I've bought some big tools over the years, but since this is 10.5, I can put it directly onto my jointer, which is pretty nice and definitely a luxury to have a 12-inch jointer. I do consider myself a hybrid woodworker, do all my milling on machines. I do enjoy using hand planes for finish work, but off to the jointer. So off the jointer, we have a beautiful milled edge. I do have a helical head in the jointer, which is very, very nice for some of the difficult grain. And then the point of the jointer is to make two perpendicular faces. This face was milled at 90 degrees to this one by keeping pressure square. And because the wood has this strong taper here, I have to think about how I want to mill it to get the most out of it. If I was to just put this down on a table saw now and run it through here, I'm going to lose a lot of this sapwood. I don't actually want the bark, but I do like the look of the sapwood quarter sawn. I don't know if you can see the grain. So you got that figure coming through. What I'm going to do is, just to have two nice faces to work, I'm now going to take this and throw it through my planer. Way when I stand it up, I know when I go to resaw this exactly how it's going to work out. What I'm going to hope for is the top and bottom board are going to come from one piece. The sides will easily come from another, and I'll hopefully have a board that I can put on my shelf to store for 50 years because I have a million pieces of wood. Maybe one day I'll do a wood tour, but I have a shed full. I have wood stored all around, and then I have an upstairs here just full of wood that I've collected. Off to the planer. So back to the bench after the planer. So we have theoretically two faces that are parallel to each other. This 90 degrees perpendicular. We have this live edge that I'm gonna leave on for when I resaw this on the bandsaw to get the most yield. This is about 2 3/4 or 11 quarter? Yeah, 4, 8, 11 quarter. I usually resaw heavy. So with this being 2 3/4 or 11 quarter wood now, when I resaw this, which is basically cutting slices out of it. Ideally would love this wood to be, that I'm making for the box, probably 4/4 wood. Flip it back and forth, but 4/4 wood is 1 inch. My problem is, if I do 1 inch, 1 inch, The bandsaw doesn't have much of a curve, but that leaves me the last 3/4 of an inch. Counting for the curves, that gets a little bit thin on my last piece. So what I'll probably do is come in 15/16. I can get 3 usable pieces of wood. They won't be 4/4, but for the boxes I'm making, if they're 3/4 of an inch or 3/4 wood, it'll be good enough for what I'm doing. And that'll give me room to plate it down from that 15/6 to get to the 3/4 of an inch. The only other thing I'm gonna do, and this is not something that you have to do, is because I have my miter saw set up nowadays, is I'm gonna cut these edges perpendicular. I'll get over to the bandsaw. This came out to be right about that 15/16. I'm gonna have to commit to what I want to do here. 1/8 over 8/4. What other nice thing too is I could set it up. I know this is a flat base because I ran this through the planer, and I would joint and plane the middle piece. This crack is gonna take it about to there, but while doing that, I don't have any crack here. So, we started with a big chunk of wood, ended up with 3 smaller pieces. Middle one, after all that talk, is a little thinner than I would like, but I don't trust my bandsaw completely. I'd rather stay thicker and get 100% good usable stuff. I love the sapwood. It's a really darker sap. So these are all the same thickness. They don't have to be. The sides and the top don't have to be the same thickness. There's no reason why they have to be. The way these were milling up, it just made sense to make them the same thickness. Why not? This 113 is going to have its own box. It's not super special, but it's cool. It's a little different than everything else that I have. I don't need this width here. For like the sapwood, if this wasn't for a shop project, I would let this stuff sit longer, see what it wants to do, remill it, see what it wants to do, and maybe even remill it again because it is air dried. So I'm thinking now it might be cool to wrap the sap all the way around the outside. That wasn't originally what I was thinking. So weird, I'm having too much of a debate for shop stuff here. So these are my 2 pieces back from the table saw. I ended up with these 2 being cut off just because I like the sapwood. I could have made it all from 1 piece, but these aren't bad cutoffs. The next thing I'm just laying out is how I want this to sit. This will probably be my top. I think this is cool with the 1/4 sawn figure in there. And it's just gonna run sort of out of sapwood. You'll see some from the bottom. And then I have this piece here too, which is very similar. I'll probably do this as the bottom, but I'm sort of liking this side. So if this is my top, I'm going to leave a little bit because I'm going to cut these square on the miter saw. That's going to sit here once I dovetail everything. So these 2 will get cut together. So they're the exact same size. I'll stack those up. Since it's a dovetail box, it's going to sit on the wall. This longer portion is going to be the pins, and it's going to go into this board, which will be my tail board. I know I need at least this much to sit down because that's going to be sitting into this box here. I don't want it to be a perfect fit, but I don't want it to be huge. So if right there is about my top, I know it needs to sit in. Right about there's a nice top. From there, I'm just going to add in the thickness of my board here. Off to the miter saw. I like to cut with both of them, the blade just buried in there. I'm not taking a lot off, but I feel like it doesn't deflect out. Theoretically, these are exactly the same. And you can't feel a physical difference, which is what I go for. Looks pretty cool, right? I have all my stuff. On my sides, top, bottom. This is just a little too sappy for me. I'll put that inside. I like this on the out, so this is gonna be, I'm gonna write out on it. When I go to put my pins into it, which way I want this facing. This one's pretty cool. We go this way. So now I have to decide top or bottom. Top. I think visually looking at it, you'll see the inside. So I'm gonna make this the bottom top. Now what I'm gonna do is just quickly run plane, not this plane, whatever's on the inside. Just for a shop cabinet. This is some nice figured stuff. So this should have a shine to it. I want to get rid of the tear out. These are all the same thickness. So this is a wheel marking gauge. Loosen it up, set the thickness, tighten it up. Now you get, so now the pins, I don't know where they're laid out yet, but they only need inside and outside. So we can come right across the faces. Now my tail boards, I'm going to go around all 4 sides. The big debate, tails or pins? I do tails first. I've been instructed on how to do pins first. I just like tails. It's totally personal preference. I like tails and I like to chop. So for layout, it depends on the size of the wood. This is not very big. It's not very big and it's pretty deep. So I didn't really set myself up to give myself too many design choices. I do a sliding rule. I don't know if I came up with it, but I haven't seen anybody else do it. It's a way for me, a hobby guy that's not in the shop a lot, can set up for one project and have it all set up for the whole box that I'm making. For all 4 sides, it's a nice simple way. I don't have to mess with dividers. If it was a bigger piece of wood, I like to do half pins on the outside, two large tails, and then 2 small tails in the middle. That's my favorite layout. These are thick pieces. Let's see what we get. I think I'm gonna try for 3 tails. It's probably a piece where most people do 2. Now with my sliding rule method, I can show you how I make it easy. I have a lot of sliding rules. So what I'll need is a setup for each one. Let's see, how does this look? So 2. So it's a little tighter than I normally would do. I'm trying to show off a little bit. It is a dovetail video, so I'm going to mark my waist here, just because these lines are pretty close. I just like to cut as I go, because I know that all my sliding rules are set up. And I just like to cut the angles by hand. They don't actually matter. I want to be perpendicular to this front and rear face as I go down. So I want to hold the same angle, nice smooth cut all the way down to that marking line. Technically it doesn't matter. Okay. Some of it will matter. But if I'm here or here, it really doesn't matter other than how the dovetail will look. And then I want to come right down to that marking line, but obviously not past it. All the same direction. I was cutting when I was talking, but I like to come in and I cut all the same direction first and then I come back. Tips and tricks that I've learned, especially for a Western dovetail saw. The Japanese saws are a lot easier, I think, to get started. But if you have a sharp saw, this is a flow rip. I love this saw. Even too sharp is not good. It's a weird balance. If you're coming in for your dovetail and you're getting it stuttered, you're pushing too hard. Lifting up on the saw, because you just want it to go back and forth. You want to be in your curve, and the weight of the saw is doing the cutting. So I have cut my dovetails. Hopefully they show up on camera. Now what I'll do is, a lot of people use the sawdust in the glue to fill any gaps or any issues. I like to save it as I'm cutting. I find that this sawdust is fine enough. That way I'm not fighting with a sander. It's my hope that after I get my box together, that I can take a few swipes with maybe a card scraper and then go right to a plane. I don't want to be sanding this, especially for shop furniture. I don't want to be sanding just to make dust. When I get towards the bottom, I will angle back, drop the back of the saw a little bit, so I'm cutting to my first marking line here, and then I can look to the front, and I'm only cutting about half this dovetail to bring it down to the line. So one board, tails cut. Saving the sawdust. On to the next. The thing that with tails too is it doesn't matter which way I cut when I do my tails. The pins, very much so. So I have all my tails cut, and now I got to get rid of these half pins. What I like to do is I like to just come in right next to the shoulder, try to get the left hand curve of the teeth right to that shoulder line as close as possible. I will set this up in the vise so I can just cut straight down. I don't want to cut the shoulder line. I don't want to cut it, like I don't want to set up in the shoulder line. I want to set up right next to it. But if I could get the set of the left side of the teeth to that shoulder line, that would be business. Come in right next to it. Coming right next to it too will allow, in this, there's a little bit right here, and I can just clean that off with a chisel and two. So if I go too far, I'm in trouble. What the sawdust is for. And now we gotta get rid of the middle. So I'll set this up here. I like to start from the outside because that way I'm as crispy as can be. And then whatever happens, happens on the inside, right? There's a lot of ways you can hold down your work. You can use hold downs. I like to use a clamp. I think it works really well in the split top rubo. You can mark it. You're gonna start to learn the direction. If you're gonna make the mistake, you're gonna make it even one that's marked. It happens to everybody. But I like to get a chisel that is just about the same width, you know, trying to squeeze every last inch out of it. First thing that I do is I set it into the marking line that I created with my marking gauge. See how easy it slides back and forth because it's already, the fibers are already severed there. And not a crazy hit. Set it up a little bit more, that shoulder. And I'll do that for each of them. This one's a little bit bigger, so I'll go across. I want to make sure it's all the way across. So now I can come back, and this is just setting up the shoulder. And come in and pare back right to that shoulder line. You can see the little tiny, let's see, focus. The little tiny bit that I take off to set up that shoulder. You can hear it too, that click. So once that's set up, I'll come in here. I'm about an eighth in front of that shoulder line, maybe a little closer. And I'll start setting up to take this waist out. And I'll stay in that same shoulder there. Now it depends on the size, everything like that. I don't like to, you could come in the end here with a smaller chisel, and you could, if you go this way, it'll sever and take out that big chunk there. But what I find is once you do that, you're really not supporting anything. So you'll have a big tear out usually if you come in and do that. My goal is to go right about halfway. I'll say eclectic chisel collection. Notice this is a square side one. So this isn't going to be as precise down in the bottom as the Lee Nielsen, which is based on the stand. Depending what I left, I'll come in front of this shoulder line, and then I'll come right to it. And the hope is I'm all set up right there with a nice, perfect shoulder line right across. The debate, right? Strop or not to strop? I strop. So one side done. That's free. I'm gonna show you how I remove that in a little bit. So they're all chopped. Come in. These are my split top. Those are free. So at this point, I got all my tails cut. I'm gonna look around, see what cleanup I might have to do. Pare the outside down to the line. Clean up anything that might get stuck when you try to drive them together. If I'm a little lower in the middle, I actually prefer that. Definitely better than a little higher. So with all the cleanup done, But for now, I just grab my number 4, my pin board, and the vise. And I want that to be flat. I can move that out. Direction does matter on these. I wrote out, so I want this side out. So this is the left. This is my top. This is my left marking knife. So I want my tails to be flush, and I want this to be a right angle to here. I won't usually check this. I'll just sort of, as long as my tails are flat across here, I know that I'm 90. And then I come in as tight as I can against the tail, and I make my mark. And then I know I can mark my waist, X, X, X. I know I'm the way I want to be, so I'll go right to the saw now and make these cuts before I readjust. As before, with the half pins that I removed, I'm gonna come in and I want the set of my saw to line up right inside that marking knife. And I want to cut it straight up and down. Again, I'm going to do all that similar angles first. And now I have all my pins cut for one side. About when you're chopping your pins is you want to come in as an angle, because you don't want to chop into what you're leaving. You want to just chop into your waist. Do this the same I do with my tails. I go about halfway. I leave a little bit off my baseline, and then I come back at the end and pare right down to it. And then once halfway, I'll go and I'll flip it around and do the other side. So this is what it looks like with the waist half chopped. Try to go again halfway, set up my baselines pretty good. The line I marked on my marking gauge there. And I'm ready to flip these over and get all the waste out. I have all these chisels, and somehow I have not restored a 1/4 inch chisel yet. This works. Just not as pretty. Between a 16th and an 1/8. And these aren't going to take much at all to get out. I'm going to do that on purpose, but it won't matter. That's what it looks like with the waist out. This was the halfway down. This is this side. So this is what our outside looks like before cleanup. Inside of our pin boards. And these are our tails. So now I'm going to clean up. I want to make sure the bottom, sometimes you get a little hump in the middle. We'll make sure that's gone. And we do want to make sure that these are going 90 all the way down. I do like to go with a little bit of an oversized chisel. I feel like I could see better. Hopefully this one's number 4. Yep. Now I'm not going crazy here. I mean, this one looks like it's a little bit out here. The rest look pretty good. Now what that can tell me is I can look and see what's getting crushed. I'm just going to fix this left one a little bit, and then I should be good on this one. So all my pins are now cleaned up. These are the outside that you're going to eventually see. Look pretty good to me. I'm happy with it. Now I'll do my final cleanup on my tails. Show side facing me is not at the very top, but in the back here. I like to just cut little recesses here. Just give myself every opportunity for success. You don't want to come all the way to the top because you're going to see this on the outside here. The tailboard done. Ready for glue. For glue, I numbered all these. I don't know if I said that in a previous step, but I definitely think that's the way to go when putting the glue up together. So one, not a crazy amount of pressure. I forgot that I wanted that inside to look a certain way there for a second. So I think that looks pretty good. Couple things to fill, nothing too crazy. Okay. The hammer won't get it completely set, so I'll come in with a clamp and that closes this side right up. So I'm not going to go crazy over clamping it here. I'm just going to get another one for the other side. The last thing you want to check is square. So, pretty good. So I'm going to clamp it up first, and I'm going to see where I need to pull to get that completely square. That got the inside of my box square. So now this last part, I debated including or not. It's very common, it's a good filler, but these gaps are not big. If I want to try to make this perfect, or YouTube perfect, or Instagram perfect, or life perfect too, what I'll do is I'm going to generously apply some of the wood glue wherever I can see some sort of opening. And then I'll use my sawdust here for my cuts to work it into whatever small little, I mean, there's almost nothing gaps there are. So this side I opened up a little bit here. I did go a little bit smaller with this half pin than I normally would. So I try to work it down in there. I'm going to take the clamps off. Along here and just slightly chamfer. A little chamfer just looks nice. This is going to be the front. So the back. Fingers crossed for Stanley 113. Fits. What do you think? $113 on the wall. I'll say thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.